Yes. Um, all right. So today we're going to continue with motivation theory, and I'll start with attendance. So today is the 15th. Today is the 15th. And it's the Ides of March. Who knows what's been happening in the financial sector? Anybody in the stock market and the banking industry lately? Anybody know? Nobody? Winjin, do you know?
Didn't the bank collapse?
Yes, very good. Do you know the name?
Munjon.
No, no,
Oh,
uh,
the Silicon
the
Valley
name of the
Bank?
bank, not your name. Although thanks for helping with the pronunciation. I never know if I get it right. So what what bank do you know?
Silicon Valley Bank.
Very good, very good. And then there was Silvergate like a week before or something that was a major bank that lent to crypto companies. And then there's another one uh, right after Silicon Valley. I'm trying to remember the name of that one. I don't Signature Bank. I just looked it up. So what's causing this? Anyone take a stab, Winjin? Do you have a theory?
Inflation and bank runs?
Yeah, okay, that's generally accurate. I mean, the thing is, what's the Fed been doing in the last 6 months, say, year, 6 months to a year? What's the Fed been doing?
Or raising the interest rate?
Very good, excellent. Okay, everyone should note that. And what does raising interest rates do to business in general?
It makes it harder to borrow money.
And what does that do? If it's harder to borrow money, what happens to how many people start businesses and how businesses expand? And
Less businesses are being opened.
very good. So you have less businesses. And one of the things about banks, I read this in a newsletter. If you know this already, God bless you. I didn't know it myself. I mean, I kind of knew it, but I didn't put it together. Banks lend for long periods, but they borrow for short periods. So in other words, they borrow short and they lend long. So if short-term interest rates start going above long-term interest rates, then the banks start to have trouble because their borrowing costs cost more than the income they're receiving. And that's exactly what's been happening. When the Fed tightens aggressively, that causes what's called an inverted yield curve, which just means that short-term rates are higher than long-term rates. Normally, long-term rates are higher. If I'm going to lend you a dollar for 30 years, there's more risk than if I lend you a dollar for a day. So people want somewhat higher rates for long-term loans. But when the Fed tightens aggressively and interest rates go above what people expect them to be over the long run, the short-term rate exceeds the long-term rate, and then that's called an inverted yield curve. And that then a lot of people say is a forecast for a recession. And part of the reason is that banks aren't making any money from their loans. They can't lend at a rate equal to what they borrow at. So when that happens, but they start to fail, the weaker banks start to fail because and as someone pointed out, my other class, uh, uh, Silicon Valley Bank had invested heavily in bonds as part of their reserves, and when interest rates go up, bonds go down. So there was this crippling effect of rising interest rates. Now, the Fed is ultimately, in part, created to support banks. It's actually technically owned by the members. It's very controversial. I mean, it's a fact, but what that means is controversial. But because the whole purpose of the Fed is to stabilize the banking system, if what they're doing is destabilizing the banking system, then it's going to make them think twice at a minimum. So no one knows what's going to happen, but Wall Street has been skeptical that the Fed would continue raising rates, that Jerome Powell, the chairman, would flinch and start reducing rates because raising rates causes a recession. Okay, so someone said, Farhan said, Silicon Valley lost 1.8 billion. Okay, now that's a big loss for any firm. And so basically you put all this together and you start to wonder, will the Fed continue tightening? And I don't know the answer. Nobody knows. So far, Powell has hung tough. What is the point of tightening if it causes all these problems? Does anyone know why are they tightening aggressively? They took interest rates from nearly zero to they're now hovering around 4% in just a year, basically. Why would the Fed want to do that? Does anyone know?
They don't want high interest. I mean, they don't want high inflation rates.
Very good. What's the link between inflation and interest rates?
How much the bonds are selling, how much the Feds are selling the bonds, like with the interest.
Okay, yeah. All right. You kind of said it. So basically, the Fed stops inflation by taking money out of circulation, and the way they take money out of circulation is by buying bonds. I mean, selling bonds. So they have bonds and they sell them, and that takes money out of circulation. But of course, if they're increasing the supply of bonds, then the price of bonds will fall. It's that simple. They've got lots of bonds. They've got trillions of dollars of bonds. They sell the bonds, generally treasury bonds, but that affects all interest rates. They sell the bonds. They take the money out of circulation. Because there's less money, prices don't go up as much. In other words, the prices are going up because there's more money. So if they take the money out of circulation, that stops the prices from going up. These relationships are really very simple, and so they're affecting supply and demand. They're increasing the supply of bonds, which reduces the price of bonds. They're raising interest rates by taking money out of circulation, and so raising the price of money. And the result is that short-term rates go up, long-term rates go down, because investors don't believe the long-term rates are going to be as high. And so the banks are having a little trouble. Now, these are like difficult questions for them. It's not so much a matter of the mechanics. Really, you could learn how to do this with a high school degree or less, in my opinion. Anyone can learn this. But the problem is, what is the moral compass that drives what they do? It's really a moral question, and there's no one right answer. is inflation a problem? If you listened to Congress last week, was it this past Monday, I think, or was it the week before? I can't remember. But in any case, in the recent congressional testimony, Powell was asked to testify before Congress. I'm just looking up the date, and they grilled. They attacked him. It was on March 8th, so that was like a week ago. It was last week. So they attacked him because they're saying, "Oh, you're causing a recession, higher unemployment." But the thing is, if he doesn't do that, then when you go to the grocery store, the price of orange juice is going up a lot faster than your paycheck. And so you can't afford orange juice, or you can't, I'm not saying you, but, people, or you can't afford, have steak for dinner, so people have to cut back in their consumption, which, for a lot of people is hard. Not everybody's rich. So basically, he's got to choose between people consuming less and some people losing their jobs, and businesses having a little harder time getting established. And I don't think you can argue that it's going to be good for the US to have high inflation. I think there are a lot of reasons for it. Just the basic thing I talked about. But if you look at the countries that have high inflation, it leads to considerable instability. A prime example, and probably one that's closest to our situation, is Argentina, which at one time was was the seventh richest country in the world back in the 1920s, 100 years ago. And due to insipid monetary policies brought on by Perón and big government philosophy, they embarked on a long-term path of high inflation, and they became a much poorer country, much less stable. There's been a lot of political instability, and they're not able to advance. So that's true of any country, whether it's Rwanda or the Weimar Republic in Germany, whose hyperinflation. They had literally hyperinflation, which means inflation was going up 100% and more in Germany in the 1920s, and then subsequently it led to a rejection of democracy. I'm not saying that they wouldn't have rejected democracy without it, but I think it was a contributive factor, and the rise of Hitler. And the same thing is what I mean to say is that there are other factors here that are worse, which is this. The US has the global reserve currency, so a lot of other countries use the dollar. In particular, it's not just that they use it as their currency. Like if you go to Panama, or I was just in Curacao, the dollar is used as a daily currency. In Curacao, they also have their own currency, but they use the dollar quite often. In Europe, yeah, it's true. Europe, because of both government policies and the price of natural gas there and oil, they have had a terrible economy for the last few years, but that leads to the same problems that I'm talking about. So, in other words, Europe, I'm just looking up right now the inflation rate in Switzerland, which is usually the most stable European country. And in Switzerland, it's 3.4%. So I think if you look at the countries in Europe, the ones that we want to be like, such as Switzerland, still have fairly stable inflation. If you look at Germany, which is all, a very, very strong economy. That one shot up to 8.7% this year. Okay, and they've got to tighten. The thing is, the European Bank may not have the same self-discipline, and it's going to lead to the same kinds of problems I'm talking about. But for the US, the added problem is that the dollar is the global reserve currency, so it's used in international trade. Not just that other countries use it, but that countries like Saudi Arabia, which don't have their own currency, use it when they transact oil deals. And so there's been huge demand for petrodollars, and that's in not just in oil, but in all global trade. So the number of dollars in circulation globally is far greater than the number of dollars in use in the United States. About half or more are used in global trade. I don't think they have an exact number of where the dollars are, but I think that the last time I looked a few years ago, it was like half. And so basically, if the dollar becomes unstable, then that's going to end. And there are a lot of disadvantages to losing the reserve currency status. So if the dollar becomes unstable and the BRIC countries, Brazil, Russia, India, China, decide not to use the dollar, and they're already talking about that. You're gonna see, or did I say it wrong? Maybe Iran instead of India. You're gonna see a lot bigger problems here. Yeah, India is the I, but Iran also. Iran is in that category too. So basically, it could really hurt if if there's a collapse of the dollar when the pound stopped being the global reserve currency during World War I, and then there was a gradual period where it was halfway until World War II, and then the dollar. And after it stopped being the global reserve currency, Britain became much poorer. And that could happen here too. So there's a lot to worry about in these questions. And if you look at Switzerland, they're richer than us. And so one of the other countries in Europe that's richer than us right now is Ireland. And they have also a much higher inflation rate now. I'm just looking it up as we're talking. So they currently have 8%. And the thing is, it's going to weaken them significantly. So there's a lot to worry about there. And of course, when the Fed tightens, the stock market doesn't worry much about inflation, but they do care about interest rates. So as the Fed tightens, you're going to see declining stock markets if they continue. Now, some people are saying, well, what if the bankruptcy of these banks is going to end up causing the Fed not to tighten? I don't know. All right, so that's a lot to think about. All right, so let me take attendance. Syed Abbas, Syed Ahmad.
Here, Professor.
Professor.
Syed Abbas.
Okay, you got both Syeds. Samima Akhtar.
Good morning, Professor.
Good morning. Alessandro Alessi. David Batesh.
Yeah, good morning, Professor.
Good morning. Anam Bahati.
Good morning, Professor.
Good morning. Melissa Calixto.
Here, good morning.
Good morning. Winston Chan.
Good morning, Professor.
Good morning. Bin Chen,
Here.
hello. Kai Chen,
Here.
hello. Ji Rui Deng,
Good morning.
good morning. Farhan Aram,
Here. Good morning, Professor.
good morning. Brianna Faustin, Steve Fenn.
Here. I'm sorry, I'm here.
Oh, Brianna.
I'm here too.
Okay. Okay, Steve. Jonathan Gonzalez,
Here.
hello. June,
Here.
first to sign in. Min Hao Hu, Angelica, Jian Lin,
Here.
hello. Leon,
Good morning, Professor.
good morning. Elizabeth,
Good morning, Professor.
good morning, Elizabeth. Rochelle,
Here.
hello. Demi,
Here.
hello. Cameron,
I'm here.
hello. Nicholas Neglia,
Here, good morning.
good morning. Aquino Olivier, Jenny Perfecto, Chenille,
Here. Good morning.
good morning, Chenille. Anna,
Good morning, Professor.
good morning, Anna. Winjin,
Here.
yes, you I knew was here because you spoke. Jaren, Yiwen Wu, Yiwen, Kristen Yip,
Hi,
Anita
good morning,
Zhao.
Professor.
Oh, hi, Kristen. Anita Zhao,
Here.
hello. And Zinrang, I think, dropped. Zinrang, I think we should check that. Okay, Alessandro Alessi, is Alessandro here? Minghao Hu,
Here, Professor.
oh, you're here? Okay. Angelica, Aquino Olivier, Jenny Perfecto, Jaren Walls, Yuen Wu. Okay, those are the absent people. Okay, someone Zoom kicks out Anna. I'm sorry to hear that. Yeah, all right. So this is all important stuff, the inflation, and it's not directly OB stuff, but it's related. I mean, really how companies manage their internal processes is going to be affected deeply by external economic variables, things like how they treat employees, benefits, compensation, all this kind of thing. It's all going to be affected. All right, so today, last time I was talking about the traditional theories, and now I'm going to talk about the content-based theories of motivation. And these include self-determination theory, which includes cognitive evaluation and self-concordance theory. And there's also regulatory focus theory, which is fairly straightforward, and job engagement theory. And so these three content-based theories focus on motivations or rewards or things that motivate. Context-based theories focus on environmental factors, especially rewards and imitation of others. And process-based theories have to do with the mental processes that people engage in. And so basically it's a little bit abstract, but it doesn't hurt to familiarize yourself with it a little. And so, e- excuse me, I don't know what to do about that. So, basically, people differ as far as regulatory focus theory. People differ in how they regulate their thoughts. And so, promotion focus people, okay, sorry about that, guys. Okay, so, all right, my wife's handling that. She's got some immigration problems. So basically, people differ in how they regulate their thoughts and what they focus on. Some people look at goals more, and some people look at risk more. So some people say, I'm gonna try, I'm gonna shoot for the stars. Like I just reviewed a case study last night about a guy who was a musician, and he moved from Brazil to Germany to try to be in the Berlin Philharmonic, and he tried for years, and he just couldn't get in. He just couldn't make it, and he struggled and struggled, and after all this time, he started to think he would go into computer programming. And I told it has so happens that my sister was trained a little bit as a cellist, and she never pursued it professionally, but she continues to play now. At she's in her 60s now, and she continues to play. She's in a rock band, and she plays in a classical music group and so on. And I said, I told her about the case study. Is like sort of like her life in a way. And she said a lot of computer programmers who, are musicians who don't, cut it. And, when I say don't cut it, they don't make it into the professional realm, and become computer programmers. But like somebody who is that committed to succeeding in, classical music, would be very sort of promotion focused, that they would focus towards the goals. And that's, I encourage students to have clear goals, so that they can uh, push towards that end. On the other hand, people who avoid conditions that pull them from goals might be called prevention focused. So let's say you want to be successful, and you also dream of being a musician, but you also want to make a good living, and you're finding that being a musician isn't satisfying some of those goals. You might give that up and become something else. And the people more likely to do that would be prevention focused, to say, yeah, it'd be nice to be a musician, but I'm practical, and I'm going to do what's most likely to succeed. Whereas the promotion focused people will shoot for the goals. Both of these are motivational states, and can be viewed as things that motivate you. Self-determination theory is somewhat complex. It basically says that there are several basic psychological needs that affect motivation. And we talked about this last time when we talked about McClellan, that people have the need for relatedness, going back to Alderfer's ERG theory, the need for autonomy, the need for competence, and all of these needs interact. Motivation can be autonomous, or it can be controlled by others. So in other words, people can have that internally, or firms can provide it. Well-being and performance are influenced by motives. So specific job activities will influence how people feel. Cognitive evaluation theory argues that extrinsic rewards reduce intrinsic interest in a task. And this goes back, I was talking, I think last time in this class about, if I wasn't, I'll talk about it now, about Deci and Alfie Kohn, who argue, Alfie Kohn wrote this book, Punished by Rewards. And the argument is that rewards demotivate you. Not in the sense that Hertzberg talked about it, that they demotivate you if you don't have adequate pay. But what people like Alfie Kohn say is that rewards demotivate you if you get them at all. So basically, so this book, Punished by Rewards, I'm putting it on the chalkboard. And what they do, and the reason I would say this literature is wrong, is fundamentally wrong, is that they do a lot of animal experiments. They especially with monkeys, and basically, if you read his book and some of the other literature in that field, they do one experiment with monkeys after the next, and they show over and over again that if you tell the monkey, if you do this task well, I'll give you a banana, they're not as motivated as when they turn it into a game and they play a game with the monkey. So animals can have playfulness too. You know, if you have a dog, you know this, they sometimes like to fool around and fight with you and stuff like that. You know, it's part of having a pet. And so this is a better motivator for monkeys than offering them a treat. Now, the thing about that is, though, so they show this in 100 different ways, and it's all with monkeys. And the problem is that people aren't monkeys. And it's not all animal experiments are generalizable. And the big problem with saying that rewards don't motivate people is that all people, virtually 100%, I'm not saying 100%, because I've known people, like they used to call them years ago, they'd call them a dollar a day, a dollar a year man. Somebody's a dollar a year man. It means that they're working, they're doing some kind of work for fun. Like I once had a professor who was a dollar a year man. So I've known people like this. And he had been a successful lawyer. He retired. He had some medical condition. He became a professor out of wanting to help students. And he was a great teacher. I still remember him clearly. But he said to the college, I'll teach for you for nothing. I'll teach students law for free. Just give me $1 a year so I can deduct. So it's a job, so it's not a hobby, so I can deduct expenses. And I'll teach. But, you know, this is very rare. And nobody does like real work that way. I mean, he was, you know, he was a smart guy. He enjoyed teaching. If you you know, talk about a job like being a construction worker or being an electrician, or you know, even what you know, teaching business, it's much less likely. There are people that do it. Jim Rogers for a while taught at Columbia. You know, I don't know if they paid him or not, but even if they did, it wasn't why he's worth like a few hundred million, and you know, they're paying him a few thousand. So basically, there are people who do that, but very, very few. It's very rare that people would teach or do anything, you know, for free. So basically, once you commit to doing something for money, that's called cognitive dissonance, which we've talked about a few times. So if you say, I'm going to go to work today in order to pay the bills, and most of us are in that position, including me, you immediately set up a thing that you want money. So this creates cognitive dissonance, and you want money. The monkeys don't have to pay a bill. Monkeys in captivity have a carefree life. Maybe we kind of wish we had that kind of life. They don't have to work. They, enjoy themselves all day. But really, we don't. We don't want that kind of life. But basically, so there's no cognitive dissonance to wanting monkeys. For monkeys to, in other words, there's no cognitive dissonance for monkeys to want a paying job. And so the results they get are going to be completely different. Let's say we lived in a utopia where everybody was rich, and then people did work because they enjoyed it. In that case, money might be a demotivator. But in that case, who would do the plumbing? Who would do the electric work? Who would make shoes? So I think most of the concerns of business, I mean, would somebody really work in a computer help center for free just because they find it fulfilling? It seems so far-fetched to me that I wonder how this could even be published as a serious theory. Yet it's the Harvard Business Review often publishes this kind of material. They've done it a number of times. So basically, the idea of this cognitive evaluation theory is that extrinsic rewards reduce intrinsic interest in a task, and intrinsic motivation is better. And again, you see the connection to Hertzberg. Hertzberg said that lower order needs or satisfaction of physiological needs or hygiene factors are demotivators. If they're not satisfied, we get demotivated. If they're satisfied, we're not motivated. In cognitive evaluation theory, intrinsic motivation, i.e. the interest of the work, is better than extrinsic motivation, which is material things, the lower order needs. So basically, moving into self-concordance theory, the idea is that people who pursue work goals that align with their interests and values are more satisfied with their jobs and feel they fit into their organizations better and may perform better. And this is pretty much why I talked about goals. And it fits matching theory, which is not only important in OB, but economists talk about it too. Economists talk about it as a kind of exploration, that individuals seek firms that ultimately maximize their utility. And I think that's a good way to look at it, but it's oversimplistic because we don't live in a free market society where it's possible to change jobs in a wide array of different jobs and easily find other jobs. America was like that 150 years ago. It's not now. So, and it wasn't by the 1940s and 50s. Arthur Ross in the 1950s wrote about the new industrial feudalism, that people found a single job, a port of entry, and basically worked their way up. And in the 1960s, Doringer and Peoria wrote about internal labor markets, that firms now provided the labor market for most people who would rise in a job family. But the thing is, if you find yourself in a given type of job, even in the more flexible market of today compared to the 1950s, and I think we have gone back with the gig economy that your book talks about, we have gone back to something closer to what was in the 19th century, but it's still nothing like it. There's still like a high emphasis on specialization and a kind of feudalistic assumption that if you're trained in something or you have experience in something, you should stay in that thing. And it's going to be a lot harder to change than to go into the right thing in the beginning. So basically, you want to find that. And, that's basically what self-concordance theory is saying. Now, the third of these content-based theories, I said, is job engagement theory. And the idea is that people will tend to invest in things in which they're engaged. For instance, I find that when I call on students in the class, they sometimes don't answer because they're not at the computer or they're not listening or something. And that means I'm failing to engage the students. Okay, so engagement means that people choose to invest physical, cognitive, and emotional energies. And what causes it is probably a combination of environmental factors and personality. So a personality trait called proactive personality, how likely you are to take control of a situation, conscientiousness, which I talked about with the big 5 personality traits, extroversion are going to affect engagement. A key trait is also positive affectivity, which means that people who tend to feel positive about things tend to be more engaged. Now, what the people who advocate cognitive evaluation theory would say is that students aren't engaged because of the grade system. That, in other words, you give them a diploma, so all they want is to have their ticket punched, do the minimum, and get out. And they don't really, because they're graded, the rewards create a focus on just getting the grade and not on learning. There may be truth to that. In other words, it could be that at times cognitive dissonance works against a healthy kind of engagement. And that's unfortunate. I'm not sure what to do about it. I don't think there's a remedy, because if I try to teach, I've tried this in my career. I've done things early in my life that almost cost me my job, where I tried to motivate students in ways different from the usual grade and test system. And I have to say, the students absolutely hated it. They didn't want it. And, you can't really motivate people in a way that conflicts with the system. You're limited by the system. So I'm not really sure what to do. Moving into what your book calls context-based theories. These are theories that emphasize incentives and learning and culture. And these are very, very important for understanding motivation. If you look at 12 o'clock high, the problem he faced wasn't generally that the crew lacked engagement, although it was true. I mean, you might argue with this, or that their goals didn't align with the unit, although you could argue that it did, that their goals did not align, I mean to say, with the unit. And you could also say maybe the whatever extrinsic rewards were inadequate, but I don't think there were very many extrinsic rewards, so I don't think that was the problem. But the way that Savage viewed the problem in 12 o'clock high is that it was largely due to the context. And so what he had to do is change reinforcement. And so I think you could make a much better case that the way that the problems that Savage had to solve were rooted in context-based theories rather than content-based theories. And so basically, what was the problem? Low morale, a culture that wasn't accomplishing a lot, high stress, the knowledge that you were likely to die in a mission. All of these things were militating against any kind of motivation. So how does he turn around and motivate this crew? First of all, he tries to change the culture in that initial speech, and he says, "Picture yourself already dead. Change your attitude. We're going to change our attitude. Second of all, we're going to improve at the task, and we're going to focus on the task." And in this, he was following exactly what Fiedler recommends. We're going to get to that hopefully today. And then third of all, that he was going to, he didn't have at his disposal very many tools for rewards, but he did have tools for punishment. So he arrests Gately, and he suggests that people who don't do their jobs will be punished. And he, part of this is the martinet, the strict discipline that he applies early on. And this in turn enhances a task focus, that you're punished if you don't adhere to the task. And this is traditional military culture, nothing he invented, but he applies it. In contrast, and we'll get to this in a minute, Davenport, whom he replaced, has what's called a relations-oriented approach. And this works well in business, but in a severe situation that's severely difficult and negative, it doesn't work. So basically, you could argue that he was simply applying behaviorism. Behaviorism is the idea that behavior is modified by its consequences. So if you, and this was also the early advocate of it was a guy named Thorndike, who argued that the effects of your actions will train you on how to behave. So what Thorndike says is that, and also the behaviorist. So you had Thorndike's law of effect, and then you also had B.F. Skinner, who wrote a famous book. There's no underline in this, but I won't use quotations. Beyond Freedom and Dignity, and many other books. Back when I was in high school in ancient times in the 1970s, the book was very, very popular. Some of my fellow students were reading it. Skinner basically argues the argument of the behaviorists is that people have no mind. They have no soul. They have no mind. They're like plants. They're like machines. And what motivates them is purely the environment. So and this is called operant conditioning or behaviorism. So the way that people learn is largely through as Thorndike said, the consequences of their behavior. And so, you could set up a little model. Maybe I'll just draw a little picture here. So, you have some individual, and there's some kind of stimulus that awakens their actions. And then that stimulus evokes some kind of habit that they've learned in the past, that they've learned through the mechanics of the environment. the habit then evokes a behavior, or let's say, okay, we'll say it uh, interacts with a behavior. So they have a habit and they behave in accordance with the habit, and that then results in um, um, some kind of outcome. And the outcome would be a reinforcement. Okay, so the reinforcement could be things like punishment, that, it could be something negative that happens. For instance, you stick your fingers, you're a little kid who sticks your fingers in an electric socket and finds out you shouldn't do that. It could be reward, that you get a high grade on your exam and your teacher gives you a gold star, and your mother lets you have ice cream because you got a good grade. It could be what they call avoidance learning, which means that a negative thing in your environment is removed, like you did a good job in school, so you don't have to do your chores today. And finally, which one am I leaving out? Extinction, which is that you're exposed. You were thinking you would get a positive, but you've done something wrong, and the positive doesn't appear. For instance, you think you're going to get a promotion, and then you step on the boss's foot, and the boss gets annoyed, and you don't get the promotion, and that extinguishes your hopes. So basically, this kind of reinforcement leads in turn. I have trouble navigating these things. So that leads in turn. Can I close this box? No, it won't let me. All right. So the extinction leads in turn to reinforcing the habit. So because you behaved in a certain way, you can think of it like you're driving along, you smell grease you smell the hamburger smell from McDonald's. You like McDonald's, so you drive in, it's your habit. You have a Big Mac, delicious, it reinforces the habit, and so you continue to go to McDonald's. All right, and what behaviorism suggests is that you learn by being rewarded. So it's the exact reverse of cognitive evaluation theory. Cognitive evaluation theory says extrinsic rewards like higher pay are useless. Reinforcement theory, or behaviorism, says that people learn to behave in a certain way to get what they want and to avoid what they don't want. Reinforcement strengthens this pattern and causes people to repeat. So learning results from consequences, as I've said. So basically, this idea leads to the exact reverse. And if you were listening last time, you know that this is almost the same as scientific management. That scientific management says that people are rewarded by piece rates and they don't have to think for themselves. Management will use industrial engineering to design a job. The worker doesn't need to think, they just need to do what they're told. And if they do what they're told, the more they do it, the more they'll get rewarded. So basically, you could say scientific management is an application of behaviorism. Now, I always found behaviorism to seem to me to be absurd, not because the basic model is wrong, like this thing that you learn from your actions, I think is true, but they're too narrow. They Skinner kind of assume that some elite would shape all human behavior. That, you know, and this was related very much to the model that Taylor had in scientific management, that an industrial engineer would tell everybody how to work. Skinner, writing 50 years or 60 years after Taylor, or 70 years after Taylor, in the 60s and 70s, Skinner kind of said that an elite can shape human society, because if you give people the right incentives, they will behave the way that you want them to behave. So basically, this model to me is ridiculously narrow, because it assumes that people can't think for themselves. Like, you can't figure out that, you know, the stock market is going to go down or the stock market's going to go up. And maybe you can't, but in some circumstances you can. And some of the time you can think for yourself and figure it out. So basically, you know, if you have a problem, sometimes you can solve it. And it's not because you copy someone, or you do, it's not because you've experienced rewards and punishments. It's because you've thought for yourself, or you've copied what other people do. So the criticism of Skinner was codified by the brilliant Albert Bandura, who created and wrote a book of the title Social Learning Theory. And it's a very neat, compact theory. I respect this work. And basically what he says is that it's a triangle. So he doesn't say that behaviorism is wrong. He says rather that it's only part of the story. And so you have a person who learns from the environment, but also learns from the consequences of what they do. So people can imitate what they see others do. So you see somebody else making money selling insurance, and you say, okay, I can sell insurance too. Or people could say in their own minds, wait a second, a way out of this problem might be to become an insurance salesman. So they think of it themselves. So that there's some kind of cognitive process, there's imitation in the environment, and people learn from experience. So they have all three, and the three interact. And this to me is a far superior theory to behaviorism. And it subsumes behaviorism, it includes behaviorism. So basically, consequences, learning, and individual perception, imitation, affect behavior. And this, you know, this really kind of tells you where organizational culture comes from, because if people learn from imitating each other, then if some people behave in a certain way and it works, then everybody's going to start learning from them and behaving in that way. So modeling and learning from others is important. Behaviorism allows for direct consequences, but not enough for individual perception and interpretation. And basically, that's what social learning theory argues. So you might say this is common sense, which it is, but it's a testable theory. It's formal testable theory. All right, now moving into process-based theories. Expectancy theory argues, I'll go back on the chalkboard. I know this stuff is kind of theoretical, but bear with me. This is really the heart of organizational behavior, motivation theory. I mean, everyone who studies organizational theory, organizational behavior, learns this material. So basically, expectancy theory argues that your expectations about your rewards and the task motivate you. And this is a longstanding managerial theory that was penned by this psychologist Vroom at Yale back in the 1950s, I think. And basically what expectancy theory holds is that, first of all, people are different. People have different tastes or valences for rewards. For instance, a monkey might like a banana. You may not be that motivated by a banana. You might prefer to get paid in cash than in bananas. All right. So different. I'm not saying monkeys are people, but they're close enough that you can make the comparison. People have different tastes. Like if you're Bill Gates, you're not going to do something. You're not going to paint my house for $20,000, but if you're a house painter, you will. I mean, he's not motivated by $20,000. That's to him is pocket change. Whereas to a house painter, that's a good, of course, to anybody, it would be a good, anybody but Bill Gates, practically, it would be a good amount of money to be motivated by. So expectancy theory says that people have different valences. That's a term Vroom uses for rewards. Second of all, people have expectancies of their ability to accomplish the task. So basically, the idea is that if you ask me to translate an ancient Greek book, like let's say Homer's Iliad, into English, and you say, I will pay you 50 grand to do that, I will not be motivated, because it would take me years to learn Homeric Greek and be able to know it well enough to translate Homer's Iliad into English. On the other hand, if you said to me, we need to do a study of our compensation plan, can you help us with that, and we'll pay you 50,000, then I would say, yeah, I know how to do things like that, so I'll be glad to help you. So we're going to be motivated to do something if we believe that we have the ability to accomplish the task. Okay. And you might say, well, how do you get employees to believe that they have the ability to accomplish the task so that they'll do it? And the answer is training. That you can train employees to be able to do the task, and so they'll believe they can do the task because they know they can. And then third of all, the third valence is that there has to be a level of trust or the expectancy that the reward will be given or paid. Okay, so you have to trust the manager. And I think part of the reason why this is important is the history of scientific management, which I talked about last time. In the history of scientific management, managers would tell the workers, if you produce up to the standard, you'll get a bonus. Then when the workers were producing up to the standard and getting the bonus, the management would say, oh, I see you can work faster, so we're going to raise the standard to a higher level. So you have to do more just to get the bonus. And so that resulted in a lack of trust. And so employees historically would restrain their work when they were being checked for time and motion studies, and would withhold their effort so that the standard wouldn't be set too high. And then when it was later changed, it would still be within their ability to reach the standard. So there has to be trust. You have to believe. If you say to me, I'll pay you $50,000 to redesign our compensation system, I might say to you, well, I don't really believe you can give me the 50,000, so I'm not going to do it. Okay, so basically the idea is that motivation equals the valence for the reward times the expectancy, sorry about that, expectancy of the ability to do the task. And you could call that, by the way, self-efficacy, the ability to accomplish the task. You want to use big words, that you're competent, self-efficacy. And you interact that with the expectancy that you will receive the reward, that the reward is legitimate. Okay, so if any of these is zero, one of the messages of expectancy theory is that if any of these items, valence, expectancy of self-efficacy, and expectancy that the reward is legitimate, if any of them are completely absent, then there will never be motivation. So if you have no valence for any rewards, let's say you say, I give up, I don't want to work anymore, I want to retire, nothing will motivate you, okay? Or if you really have zero belief that you can do the task, it doesn't matter if you value the reward, and it doesn't matter if you trust the person to give it to you. And if you have no trust, you think the person's a crook and you don't trust them, you will not be motivated to do what they want. Okay, so basically expectancy theory is a very practical theory. It leaves a lot of open questions. So it doesn't say that X will happen if you do Y. It says basically it all depends. And this in turn is related to what we'll talk about, I guess, next time, because we're running out of time here. And this material is taking a little longer than I thought it would. It's basically a contingency theory. The idea of a contingency theory is that it all depends. Now, moving into some other process-based theories, goal setting theory is very important. We talked about goals already in regard to your own future. And goal setting is one of the most powerful motivational tools. Locke and Latham, two scholars who wrote, I think it was from the 1960s into the 2000s. Locke and Latham argued that goals will work, and they did a lot of empirical studies that show, they did studies with loggers, and they did studies with all kinds of workers, and they showed that so he's even publishing in 19. I see he has a piece, Edwin. I've talked to him a couple of times, Edwin Locke. We share similar views, and he published a piece in 2019, so it's only 3 years ago, the development of goal setting theory, a half-century retrospective. So he goes back a very long time, and God bless him. He's, he's well on, I'm sure. He accomplished a great deal and showed, in his career, he focused on one thing, which is productive. It turned out to be very productive for him with goal setting theory. It's an important topic. And what Locke and Latham showed is that difficult goals result in higher performance. So if you set higher goals for yourself, you may not reach the goal, but you're going to achieve more in life if you set high goals. Commitment plays a role. Goals affect simple tasks more than they affect difficult tasks. Independent tasks are affected more than interdependent tasks. If you get feedback about your performance, it will lead to higher performance. So if you see the results of what you do, it'll lead to higher performance. Motivation for good performance differs from motivation to avoid bad performance. Those are two separate issues. And people who focus on mastery, where you focus on mastering a task, tend to outperform people who try to avoid failure. Goal setting does work. Research says that mastery orientations have positive outcomes. Avoiding failure has weaker outcomes, and outcomes for focusing on performance is not as strong as focusing on mastery. Okay, so basically, an ideal way to handle this is to set stretch goals, to set goals that cause people to stretch. You don't want it to be so difficult that they can't do it, but you want it to be so difficult that they have only a 50% chance of doing it. So if you say to someone, to do something that's absolutely impossible, it's not a motivator. But if you say to someone that they have it to do, that they should accomplish at a level that they have a halfway chance of reaching, then that is useful. The idea of self-efficacy theory is just that, and it's also related to expectancy theory. It's just that self-efficacy is associated with confidence. People who are confident and have self-efficacy are more likely to succeed. So creating a sense of confidence in people will help them to become more successful. Self-efficacy, creating a sense of self-efficacy creates a positive spiral in which those who have it become more engaged and increase performance, thereby increasing their sense of self-efficacy. So your goal in managing people should be to make them feel positively about themselves, to make them feel that they can do things. Positive thinking, as Napoleon Hill said in his book, The Power of Positive Thinking. You want to increase self-efficacy through an active mastery where people are trained how to do the job well, reassuring and through verbal persuasion. And another point your book doesn't add, the small wins approach, which is discussed in which Stephen Covey talks about in 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, that you divide difficult tasks into small tasks and you have people succeed at the small task. Like if you saw that old movie, The Karate Kid, when the Zen master, karate master, whatever he was, trains the kid, he starts out by having him like do some menial task, like sweeping, I think it was. Saw a movie decades ago. So he has the kid do some menial task, and he's got to prove himself at that before he moves on. And so basically, this idea of small wins is very, very useful for building self-efficacy. Like when I was a kid, I didn't like art, and the art teacher, is a very good teacher, sat me down after class and said, okay, well, just try drawing something really simple. And I tried it, and she was certainly helpful trying to teach me, but it didn't change my feeling that I'm not, not that interested in drawing. But basically, then self-efficacy theory, you want to build self-efficacy. Equity theory is, oh, we're out of time. Okay. I'm very sorry, we're out of time. And for next time, we're going to continue. I'm sorry to drag this out for another session, but it looks like we're going to fall slightly behind because I still want to talk about the job characteristics model, flex time, and employee involvement. But we should get caught up by next Wednesday. So we'll finish up the discussion of motivation next time, and I'm a little confused now. What does this say? Waiting room participants. I don't know. Okay, well, I lost a lot of people, but anyway, class is over. So I'll see you next time. If you have any questions, feel free to ask. I'm still with you for 10 minutes. Anyone have questions?